Laura Vargas, and I'm the Director of Outreach Programs for Peer Support Community Partners. And this is Grief in the Wake, conversations about loss to suicide and substance-related causes. Video series where we touch briefly on topics related to losing a loved one to substance use or suicide. Today's topic is on different grieving styles.
Thanks, Laura. I'm Joanna Bridger from Safety, Hope, and Healing, Counseling and Consulting. And this is something that comes up almost always, right? I have been responding to families after overdose and suicide loss for going on 20 years now. And I think that so often there are differences in the way that people grieve that really can cause more of a rupture in the family than perhaps even the death itself in some ways. When, I think the most common example that we see is when one person is really deeply feeling and sinking into and in the grief, kind of Freudian concept of grief work, right? The sadness, the yearning, and one person is more kind of putting one foot in front of the other and going to work and doing the things that they need to do. And there tends to be this perception that the other person is doing it wrong, right? And sometimes even that they're doing it wrong, right? Like, what's wrong with me? Why am I still going to work? Or what's wrong with me? Why can't I? Right? And I think that idea is so toxic in so many ways for people, that there is one right way to grieve. Therapists used to really lean towards and push on that it had to be that more sort of Freudian grief work idea of really feeling it and remembering deeply the person. And more recent research has shown that both styles, and in fact many other styles of grieving, actually are effective, right? Are helpful and important for people. And then in fact the best option. This was something that Strobe and Shute wrote about intensively in the late 90s around this concept of the dual process model, that people who are really more doing that sort of traditional grief work, really, really actively mourning, were more what they call loss oriented, and that people who were more putting one foot in front of the other and doing the things that they needed to do were more restoration oriented. Stereotypically, this often falls on gender lines, that women have tended to be more loss oriented and men more restoration oriented. What the research really shows is that people who do best are the people who pendulate between the two, right? Who have moments of really allowing themselves to feel their grief and moments of being able to move forward and put one foot in front of the other and do the things they need to do.
And grieving deaths to suicide or substance-related causes carry a lot of nuances in many ways. And when it comes to navigating different grieving styles, this is particularly evident when we talk about stigma. We have a whole video on stigma. Stigma impacts people's ability to express their grief. Somebody might want to speak about their pain, about their loss, about their love for their person, but if others in their community, if others in their circle are holding that stigma, perpetuating that stigma, it might shut them down. It might not allow them to feel safe to grieve in the way that they naturally would. And so they might kind of outwardly portray a different grieving style. Likewise, if there are two people trying to kind of understand the other person's grief, someone might not believe that the other person is grieving enough because their grief might be more silent. This could be due to that fear of stigma, of shame, of blame that so often comes up with deaths due to suicide and substance-related causes. Likewise, the way we look at grief internally versus interpersonally might be different. We might tell others that it is okay to grieve, to express their pain, to express their emotions, yet we feel that we have to put on this strong front, and therefore expressing our grief is not what that strong front looks like, which of course we know is a myth. And for those who kind of might tap into more of a restoration oriented grieving style or a loss oriented grieving style, like Joanna described them, the interpersonal dynamics that they're navigating might cause those to either shift or to be stronger and more prevalent because of kind of the way people are dealing with us. And thirdly, these causes of death have been highly politicized. People have very strong opinions about them, and that might also impact somebody's grief and somebody's expressions of their grief, because these are such controversial hot topics that people might not want to express their full scope of their story, of their lost story, of their person's story, and of their grief now. And so we're often creating environments where people don't feel safe to grieve in the way they want to grieve, and they're then kind of navigating these different grieving styles within themselves and interpersonally with those who they're sharing this pain with.
Yeah, we were talking about how it sort of turns up the volume on whatever the person's grieving style might be. Some of the things that people have told us that they found helpful in terms of really navigating their own grieving style, and kind of being accepting of what they need in their grief, but also being able to navigate those relationships with other people who are grieving as well. I've been really thinking about being open to acknowledging how personal grief is, and that, you know, how much you loved the person isn't necessarily reflected in the way that you grieve, right? That those two things are very different and sometimes intersect, but not always. Thinking a little bit about approaching yourself and others with curiosity. What did I what did I learn about grieving from my family, from my culture, from my community? And how do those messages affect the way I'm grieving now, the way I'm showing up to this loss, or the way I'm thinking about the way other people who are grieving this loss might be grieving? Really acknowledging that there's such a broad range, and that for ourselves, it's okay, and in some cases necessary, to allow ourselves to experience moments of really feeling the grief deeply, right? That loss orientation, but also sometimes compartmentalizing and taking on that restoration orientation. That really being able to do both, is incredibly important. We're going to have a video coming soon, on that idea of dosing your grief. What does that look like, and how do you do that?
We hope you found this video to be helpful. There are tons of grief support resources out there, from professional grief support to peer grief support. There are websites and social media pages and podcasts and books that might be helpful. So it's just a matter of exploring that. If you have any topics you want to hear us cover, please let us know. We would love to do that. But we thank you for taking the time to watch this video and to engage with this series.
Thank you.